So there's lots of times I find myself like thinking like, am I making that decision out of love or fear? And hello and welcome back to the Jody Court Podcast, where we get to shoot the shit with kick-ass people that are going to change your life with their stories. So we are here in our 13th episode with a fabulous friend of mine. I hold her, she's got like this whole chunk on my heart just for her. So I am super excited for her to share her story with you guys. I am sure you'll relate and find some meaning in it. But first, let's just tell you a little bit about Miss Troi Crombie. I have a list on the side here, so if my eyes divert, it's because I'm reading the long list of all the things that she does, so I don't forget all the things that she does. So Troi is a fairly well-known photographer. That is one thing. She is a painter. She is an art teacher. She is a financial consultant. She is a runner. She is a mountain biker. She is a stay-at-home mom. She is a blogger. And definitely not least, she is a friend that I know would drop anything to help anyone she cares about. She's literally everywhere. You'll see her on the trails. You'll see her at the tops of mountains. You'll see her at the coffee shops. You'll see her at home with her kids. She is all over the place, which is perfect. This woman is super driven, insanely motivated, highly accomplished. She has done so many things in her few years. I always get annoyed at how much she's done and how much younger she is than me. I'm like, always feel old. And she has a fabulous, fabulous circle of friends. And yet today, and I think this is probably the most profound part of today's podcast, is we have all of those things. And if you were looking from the outside, you'd be like, man, she's got everything dialed. But we all know you can't, you never know what somebody's story is. And we are here today to talk about the word shame. And I'm really excited to talk about this. It's something that I think Brené Brown is starting to get, more well-known, and her name is out there more. So talking about shame and vulnerability is becoming more, I want to say trendy. I don't like the word trendy, but it kind of is starting to be trendy, which I think is a good thing because we're talking about it more. And I think it's something we all deal with no matter what our life looks like to everybody else. There's a thread of shame for all of us. So I'm super pumped to have this conversation. It's going to be a deep one, I think, guys. So get your emotional game on. And I'm going to pass it over to Courtney, who's going to kick it off with some fun rapid fire questions at our dear friend Troi.
All right. Are you ready? Okay, everyone. No, wait. We got to all put up our mugs like this. There we go. We all decided that we would coordinate with mugs today. Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers. Rapid fire questions to get to know Troi better. Give me one favorite childhood memory.
I have.
Okay, what's your favorite color?
No. I want to answer that one. I just was like a little bit of an overload, I think. And then the first thing that popped into my mind wasn't really that exciting.
Well, what was it? Now I'm curious.
It was honestly like sitting like by the side of the road. I just remember our old house, like when I was really little, and like making like mud pies. I don't know why.
That's the best.
I love that. So that's why I was like, oh, I don't want to share that.
Whatever, man. One of my favorite childhood memories is like going on the swing set and then like flicking my shoes off as far as I could go. Same thing.
Yeah, that's true. And then the second one that popped into my head was camping.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Nice. Where were you born?
Just north of Kamloops in BC, in a tiny little town. Super similar to the Crow's Nest Pass, like little towns along the highway, about 5,000 people, like one high school. The city was like an hour and a half away.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
Favorite thing for midnight snack?
Oh, a banana.
I agree. Like in the middle of the night, wandering around the house, banana.
Banana. That's like the go-to in the people's household. The girls wake up like at 11 o'clock hungry, have a banana.
Yeah. And not right. Not too bad.
Favorite place you've traveled to?
Cuba was pretty interesting. Probably Cuba. But then like family trip, just like beautiful, relaxing, Hawaii.
Oh, cool. I've never been to Hawaii. All right. Maybe favorite book that you've read? Any genre.
I'm pretty attached to, I'll talk about it today too, but I'm pretty attached to this one book called It's Not Always Depression.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So I'll mention it later.
Nice. And then last one, if you were to describe Jody in one word, what would it be?
Oh, fun. She's fun.
Fun? Nice.
Yeah. She's my fun friend. I mean, she's not just my fun friend. She's also like my listening friend, and she's all of it.
Well, I'm super excited to like get to know you a little bit more, because you and I are, I think, more at the acquaintance level, and we cross paths here and there. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite times is crossing paths with you is when we met at the park, and you had your mug with you with your coffee, and the kids were playing, and I was the best. Very catch, but it's so true. Like, you're just kind of everywhere, and that's really cool.
You need the travel mug, right?
I know, right? I do that all the time now because of you. As I don't use a travel mug. I just take my mug everywhere I go. It's wonderful. Sometimes I don't even take it to the coffee shop, and I'm like, put it in my mug, please.
I can attest to that because Courtney shows up at my house to do work with her mug.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
The worst part is that lots of times I'll have a bowl in my car because I took my porridge with me too. So just don't get to that level.
I used to do that all the time, Troi. I would always have oatmeal before a run. And if we were meeting a group of people early in the morning, I would totally eat my oatmeal in the car on the way to like wherever I was meeting people.
You do what you got to do.
Yeah, totally. I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you, Troi, for giving us a little glimpse into who you are. I feel like I have an advantage because I know you quite well. So I'm excited for Courtney and the rest of whoever's going to listen to this to get to know you a little bit better. Let's just dive right into it. We're here to talk about shame. So let's just dive right into that. So do you want to share with us, Troi, a little bit more about your journey with shame and what it means to you?
Yeah, I think that when we started maybe just like talking about like a topic, the first thing that came to my mind was just what the word should mostly is like. I think that that's always has been in our vocabulary. And when we started talking about things, I said to you, I just feel like in the last little while, I've really embraced all the things that I've wanted to do instead of thinking that I should focus on one thing. So when we started talking about shame, it was actually talking about all of these different things that you listed off that normally I would feel shameful for having so many interests and so many activities and not focusing on one thing. And I joke that I'm kind of mediocre at a lot of things, but I'm not really great at any one thing. But I think that I've heard so many times that I needed to focus in and dial in on one thing. And then I kind of forgot about any of the other interests and activities that I did. And so I stopped painting for like a long, long time. And I even put my photography business aside to kind of try to focus more on another career, another business. And then just, I don't know, I think that when you're actually kind of follow your heart, maybe it's like the head versus the heart. And when you follow your heart and you do some of the things that you love to do, I think that you're happier as a whole person, right? Because you're accepting all of you. And I don't know, if I don't accept all of me and like all the parts of me, then how do I expect anybody else to accept all of those parts of me? I don't know. Does that kind of segue into?
Yeah, I love that because Courtney and I were talking about this, and we resonate with that idea in two completely opposite ways, because I am just like you. I like to be like busy. Like other people would look at my life and be like, oh, like, how do you do all the things? But if I don't have all the things, I'm not happy. Like I want all the things. Like I like doing Jody Court, and I like doing this other thing, and I like being a teacher, and I like the running and the mountain biking and the blah, 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 blah. Like I love it. And I can totally relate with your perspective of feeling like you should do less. Mm-hmm. So I have walked through life feeling tons of shame for not doing less. Mm-hmm. I remember my dad telling us, like, this was before we had kids, I think, and teaching is just a really busy job. And especially when you're a new teacher and your husband is also a teacher, and, you know, you're developing all your curriculum stuff, and we were working really hard, but we were also running and playing really hard too. Yeah. And my dad said to us, he's like, well, you just need to run less. Like your life you wouldn't feel so stressed out and busy if you just did less running and just did more work. And we were like, no, right? Yeah. But it is a lot about balance. Yeah. And so I think, and I love, you said something about like, and I've never done the number thing. Like, I don't know what number I am.
Oh, Enneagrams. Yeah.
Sevens.
You're a 7.
I'm probably a 7.
Yeah. I'd be interested.
How do you figure that out?
What Courtney is. If there's a quiz and it's a bit lengthy, and there's tons of personality quizzes and stuff. But this one is really interesting because it'll tell you, I think there's nine numbers. And it'll kind of tell you like where if you're stressed out, you'll go to the negative qualities of a certain number. And if you're kind of in your element, you'll go to the positive qualities of a certain number. And I mean, just as far as personality tests go, I think that just reading through it, you're just like that. It almost like justifies the way that you are, and you're kind of like, you feel better about yourself because you're like, oh, I'm just that way because I'm that way. And there's other people.
I'm just a 7.
I'm a 7. There's other people out there that will like, you'll align with. And like my one girlfriend's a 7. And so we'll be like sitting down together at 11 o'clock at night. And she's like, hey, I just got to answer some work emails. I'm like, yeah, me too. Okay, let's like spend half an hour and then we'll do something fun. And it's, of course, it's 11 o'clock at night because that's what we do. And then 10 minutes into it, I'm like, you want to play the Countries of the World game? She's like, yes. And so, yeah, we Countries of the World game. I want to know what you are, Courtney.
I know, me too. I'll have to do it and like post in the comments or whatever.
Maybe we should have done it before this podcast. Okay, let's just shut her down and restart.
Yeah, okay.
We'll do it and then we'll post it in the comments.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It's fun.
Yeah.
We'll have to just start introducing ourselves. Hi, I'm Courtney. I'm a 3. Like that's how we're gonna introduce ourselves to the world from now on. We're like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that, like, yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
No, you finish your thought and then I was
just gonna say I love how like the dichotomy of it's okay to want to do lots of things and not be ashamed of that, but it's also okay, and I'll let this like just segue into Courtney because Courtney's the opposite and often feels shame for not doing enough.
Yeah, which is, yeah, so it was interesting, like when I read that the comment that you said that this is kind of the area, one of the things that you wanted to chat about, I was like, oh my gosh, like I immediately felt like that is like the opposite of me. And at this point in my life too, like it's been a little bit different, but definitely right now, holy smokes, I feel the exact opposite shame where if I want to move slow, but then I'm like, oh, but like, are people thinking that I'm not doing enough? Am I not being helpful enough? And maybe I think that maybe comes from the family that I was raised into, where my family is very like involved in everything. And yeah, like I even said to Jody, I'm like, sometimes I worry that because Jody's doing so much and so many of the other things, I'm like, I wonder if she's mad at me because I'm just not doing enough, you know, like in these stories that we make up in our head. But yeah, I'm on the flip side of that, where I feel shame when I want to sit down and meditate. Even something as simple, like I even to Braden, like my husband, right? I sometimes, I told him one time, I'm like, yeah, you know, like if it's like past a certain amount of time and I'm out for a run, or if it's past a certain amount of time and I'm you know, like doing some quiet sort of meditation or reading or listening to a podcast, things that I feel really called to do right now. Like it's like this introverted side of me that's coming out. But then I'm like, oh, but I should be back and helping and doing like it. Like it's like this, the busy side is shaming the side of me that wants to go inward. And it's yeah. Anyways, just like,
because I feel
that?
like, and that like is another, I mean, I think that it's a self-care shaming that like, not, and I was going to say women, but it's not even just women. It's just people in general. Like, it's like, we don't have the grace for even for just for ourselves. Like if Courtney, if I said to you, like, I feel like I just really need to go for a walk and I just really need to like have some chill time, or I really need to meditate, you're gonna be like, yeah, like you need to do that probably, right? Like, what would you say to me?
I would be like, cool, I'll take care of your kids.
Well, exactly. But like, we have all this grace for everybody else, but we don't have it for ourselves.
Yeah. And that was something, actually, I do kind of want to bring this into our conversation too, because that's something that you mentioned in this blog post. And I think that's why we originally, when you said that you wanted to talk about the idea of shame, your blog, that one blog post you posted in January, I think it was, right? Yeah. It was nice try.
That was the best. Oh my God, I love her.
So the blog post that you did, steps I've taken to produce change in my life, and that was one of the headings. Like, I just kind of want to, I'm just reopening it. It kind of shut down on me here.
Yeah, no worries.
I loved how there's a sense of readiness. It seemingly a sense of readiness for you to want to share your story, and I guess let other people, for me anyways, it let me know, like, gave me a sense of normalcy, like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one. And all, you know, like, and so many of the things I could connect to, and just, you know, what you have a section in there, which is that, like you were talking about, like, what would you say to your best friend? Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you say that to yourself? Right? Mm-hmm. Like, why would you say such mean, terrible things to yourself and yet give your best friend, or not even your best friend, like a stranger on the street, permission to do what you really actually are wanting to do, but you won't let yourself do because it's like, yeah, for some reason wrong in your head, in your story that you've created in your mind. And I thought that was really cool wisdom that came out of that one chunk of that blog.
Well, and that's something that I can't even take credit for. So that was during, I think, like, just that was like a counseling session with one of my counselors, and they had said that they put the idea in my head of thinking of myself as the third person. Like, it was just that simple. And she said to me, like, what would you say to me if I said that? And I'd be like, oh, like, I think if you think you need that time, like, you go spend that time. Right. Mm-hmm. But I also think that I mean, I don't ever put any, like, nothing on anybody else, but I know for me, like, I wasn't taught to trust myself and, like, trust myself in what I needed. So, then that's one thing. Like, if you start listening to yourself and your body, or what you think that you need, because you're always thinking about what you should do. And that was, I'm like, I never trusted myself. So if I ever thought that I needed, like, some time away, I would not listen to that. Like, I wouldn't listen to myself.
That should word, hey?
Oh, yeah. Should.
taking it out of my vocabulary.
I have a friend whose saying is like, "Don't you should all over me."
That's me.
Yeah. It is. And it's like the moment you have that kind of an experience with either a thought or something somebody said, or, you know, where it's that the word should is threaded in there, it's immediately shame that you're dealing with. And I think shame has such a quiet way of threading itself into all these tiny little moments of our life that you have to be really aware and like conscious of what's happening in your life and in your thoughts to really actually pull out those moments of shame, because it's almost a normalcy. Like the more I'm sitting here listening to you guys chat, I'm like, oh yeah. And then that's like, I felt shame then, and I felt shame, like it's like this morning, and like, you know, all these little moments where shame creeps in that you aren't, it just seems like it's normal. Right?
So where does it come from then? Like where's, I don't know, that's my question then, is why do we have this shame? Like, is it, I mean, I feel like I have my own answer or idea of it. We've talked a lot about that idea of like shame is that, if you're talking about should, right? It's that like all of the outward messaging, hey? And I don't know, I guess I answered my own question there a little bit, but do you guys have a different opinion on it?
I think putting no blame or fault to anybody else, but like society, I grew up a lot in like a church culture, that like I remember specific moments, like being like an adult or like a young adult, but like, you know, those years that you're a young adult, like that's when you're like growing the most, and that's when you have like anybody would have almost the most, I don't know, like ability to speak into you at that time. But I remember specific moments in like a church where I was shamed for making a decision that in their mind they thought was wrong. And it made me feel like just terrible. But I think like we're like growing up, or for me growing up, like I was immediately taught that like my thoughts were like sinful or whatever, right? And like maybe that's true, maybe it isn't, but like you're constantly trying, or I was constantly feeling like I needed to correct myself, and that I was like needed to like change or do better for the sake of like I was already bad. But and like I think that change and growth is such a good thing, that I don't want to change or grow because somebody else like says I should. Like if somebody speaks constructive criticism into my life, like I'll definitely listen, and I'll definitely think about it and be like, yeah, like I could change there. Like maybe I'm not a good listener or something. But I think then the only time that you're actually going to change or grow, and see a growth, is if you're doing it for the sake of yourself, or for like for me, just like to create more like love towards myself and love towards everybody else. Like that would be the change or the growth that I would want to see in myself, not because I'm a bad person. I don't know.
Yeah, I could totally resonate with that in terms of the like growing up in a church culture. I was very outspoken about that as a young adult in my household, which my father did not appreciate. But there was a ton of shame for not wanting that in my life for a long time, because it was something that I was supposed to want in my life, but I really didn't. Like it didn't feel good to me. It didn't feel right to me. And I think now looking back, and the relationship I have with my parents now, I think my dad can respect that in me now, and he sees that I was choosing. It didn't mean I was a bad person and I was going to, you know, lead this awful life. I've led a really, really good life and a life of service to other people, which I think is what he wanted. And that's what the church is for him, is an opportunity for him to serve people. And he lives a ridiculously unselfish, generous life. but there's so much shame around that. And it comes down to fear. Like I feel like we're put into situations where, and we're told things that make us feel like we have to choose things because we're afraid of being something else, and I feel like that's everywhere. It's not just in religion, it's everywhere, where I see it in my kids making decisions because they're afraid of something else. Like they're choosing this because they're scared of this, versus choosing this, which I love that you brought like the word love into it, like choosing this out of love for something or love for yourself, not out of fear. And I think that's something that is just not taught, to make decisions from a place of love versus a place of fear.
That's actually the one. So there is a book called The Mastery of Love.
I know, I totally want to read that now. I read like the title. I was like, ooh, I got to get that book from Troi.
Yeah, so he's also the author that writes about the 4 agreements. And that was like one thing that stuck with me. And like, so there's lots of times I find myself like thinking like, am I making that decision out of love or fear? So I catch myself thinking that a lot. Because I think it's like a simple thing, like, you know, like Brene Brown, I mean, her books are amazing and she has so many great things to say, and I read her books like really slowly and kind of digest it. It takes me a long time to get through it. But that one, From the Mastery of Love, like it's a simple thing that kind of just like sticks in your head. And, you know, if you're like in that situation where you're just like, oh, I'm not really sure what to do, then I can always think like, what am I making this decision out of?
Yeah. I have to apologize. You probably see my head just keep going this way. I was trying to find this book because I know that you love books, and that and that you just like want all the information. So
I'm just like a sponge, right?
Yeah, that is the word. Those are the words I was trying to say right there. Okay, so the book is called Shameless, because we were kind of talking about the church, and so this is called Shameless: A Sexual Reformation by Nadia Bolz-Weber. So she's
I think I've heard of this book.
Anglican minister, I don't remember. Anyways, she's a priest, and she wrote this book. She's such a cool example. I heard of her off of the Troi Podcast. Anyways, and she was talking about this book, but she said one of the areas of shame that she experienced growing up in the church, which I actually also experienced as well, was the shame around sex, especially as a woman. And we don't need to get deep into the topic of that, but it was really interesing.
That's probably a whole other podcast.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That's another episode.
Yeah.
There's going to be like a few from this one, I'm sure.
I think so. Well, I mean, it's a huge topic, and like just shame itself. And then like when you dive into this area, but what I loved so much about this woman, I mean, like the book, I haven't read it, so I can't speak to the book, but what I was so drawn to in this woman was how she recognizes this this area it's not that she's like, she left the church and then came back and now is, you know, like she's a teacher within the church, right? So it's and so she's working with this, and dealing with this sort of societally or clergy, however you want to say it, like this constructed idea that we have to be a certain way, and breaking down the fibers of what that actually is and why we actually feel that way. And she, in her own life, lives in such a manner that is very much out, like, I think really in alignment with what you were talking about. Like, is this love or is this fear? You know, and like, am I feeling shame right now, or am I feeling shameful or whatever because I'm afraid of something? Is it rule-based? Is it attached to rules? That's one of the fibers that she talks about. And I know that in my life, God, I am so mean to myself because I give myself these rules. And then if I break my own rule, I'm like, you suck, Courtney. Why did you and it's like, whoa, hold on a second. Like, but where did that rule come from? I just made that up. Like, I didn't always have that rule necessarily. Right. And yeah. So anyways, wanted to mention the book in case you wanted to read it, but also just bring in that woman's just a really cool woman, that another one, like she's like another person kind of like running around in this topic.
Mm-hmm. And I think like there is so many resources out there, and there's so much learning that you can do, and there's so much that you can take and just think like, does that align with what I think? And that's one thing that we've never really been taught is like, you take all this information and then you ever just let it sit with you and be like, yeah, that feels good to me. Like, forget this. I hate the words right and wrong. I know when there is a right and wrong. I understand that. And I'll use those words sometimes, but I prefer to just think like, does that feel good to me? Does that feel good? Does it sit well? So any of this information that is coming into our brains and into our hearts, like just letting it sit with you and, do I align with that? Because I think that's the thing is that we are not, it's almost like the world or society or church culture, they're expecting us to change to conform us to a certain way. But why would we change to conform to one way or something that the world already has? Why not change to bring something new to the world? And, that's one thing that I'm like, why we're not all the same. Like, we're not the same at all.
Not even close. Yeah. Not even close. And we're not the same today as we were yesterday, or we will be tomorrow. And so what feels aligned to you today or doesn't feel aligned to you today, that's going to change in the future, right? It's this like ever evolving, like lava lamp kind of thing, right?
Where look at how many times you've changed their mind about COVID-19, right?
Totally.
Like, somebody asked me, well, why did you change your mind about the situation? I'm like, but things are changing every day. Every day we're like getting all this new information. And so, yeah, I'm allowed to change my mind. Like,
yeah. So Troi, talk to us about FOMO.
Oh.
And this other JOMO, I'm like, I don't even know what that is.
Okay. So I have another friend, I won't say her name, who's a number 7. If she watches this, she'll know I'm talking about her.
We should have I digress for a moment. We should have a number 7, getaway or something. It's so much fun.
It would be so much fun, but it would be chaos.
I'm secretly hoping. I'm like, I want number 7. I want to come.
No, you have to be there to balance us out.
Yeah.
We're out of control.
Sorry, Troi, go ahead. We start talking to each other about the joy of missing out. And I just got tingles. I love that.
Yeah, me too. That was great. I love it.
So
that's JOMO.
JOMO. That's JOMO. The joy of missing out. And I'm not going to take credit for that either, because that was her. She taught me that. I don't know where she got it from. But yeah, there is joy in missing out sometimes, right? And sometimes it's really hard for me because I'm like, I really wanted to do that. But I think about all of the things that I gained from not being there, right? And that's one thing that I've had to learn. And when you understand that you are the way you are, and there's nothing wrong with it, it's a fine way to be. Then you think about the things that you might have to work on, and that's one thing that I'm okay, I really have bad FOMO. I have a hard time missing out on anything. But I've been choosing JOMO. Choosing you're just choosing another thing that's still bringing great things into your life at that time. Whether it's spending time with yourself, reading a book, spending time with your kids, and it's all important, and it's just like choosing that time wisely, I think. So that's one thing that I've had to learn for sure is, that I don't have to do all the things. And I don't have to feel shame in doing all things. I don't have to feel shame in taking time for myself, and I don't have to feel shame if I want to do all the things. Like, I choose, and then I'm responsible for the decision that I make.
Mm.
I love that we can get to this place where we're aware enough that we can see the places that need work, that we need to put in some time on, but to do it without judgment. Like to do it, like I, in the past, would have been so harsh on myself when I recognized that there's something I need to work on. But now it's more like, it's kind of like that third person perspective, right? Where it's like, I'm just like kind of overseeing like bird's eye view of my life. And it's like, oh yeah, I need to work on that. And that's okay. And I'll get to that. And there's no judgment. I'm not wrong or bad because I have to work on that. It's just the way it is. It's just my truth. It's whatever. It's such a beautiful place to get to be able to just not judge yourself. And it's a great growth mindset, because you can work on the things you need to work on and grow as a person, but from a place of love versus fear. And that's that. I think when you're coming from a place of fear, that's when you're judging yourself, because you're not sure what other people are going to think or what you're going to think or whatever. And I had this moment when you were talking before, Troi, where I had just this like massive gratitude for our children, for like, we are all mothers, the three of us. And like, we get to teach our kids these things. Like, how fabulous is that? These things that were like, we weren't taught this, and we get to like raise our kids knowing, some emotional intelligence and knowing how to, look at whether something feels good or doesn't feel good versus right and wrong. And it's a massive gratitude for our children.
For sure. And I think that the less that we judge ourselves, the less we learn to judge others, which is essentially like, that's at some point we were judged for something, and that's probably where the shame is coming from. If we can put less judgment on our children and the people around us, then that's gonna lessen the shame in their lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just, in listening to you, Jode, it just reminded me too how much words are the words that we choose and the words that we think, and it's so subconscious, right? We don't really pay attention. And I'm only just using this as an example. You said the area that I need to work on, and then this thought came into my mind. I'm like, or that we like, that you get to work on. You're like the queen of saying get. That's the only reason why I think that like you get to work on that area of your life, kind of thing. And that got me thinking too of, when we get to work on something in an area of our life and explore that new piece of ourselves, that feels like that love. It's love driven. The word get, and I can't take credit for that. That's my mentor who told me to use the word I get to instead of I have to. And because I have to feels a lot more like I should kind of thing versus I get to, even if you're like, oh, whatever, I get to, I get, but like, like maybe like in your blog too, Troi, you talked about one of the biggest, actually it was the first section was going to counseling. And I think a lot of people would say, I have to go to counseling. And when really, like I get to go there and I get to explore this side of myself. Some of the quickest and biggest awakenings that I've had in my life has been when I've been either with a mentor or a counselor. And isn't that amazing, right? And I love that you opened up your blog with that and just took the shame out of that immediately. Like, It's not a bad thing to talk to another person. It's actually a glorious thing, and it's so helpful. And why do we have shame around that to begin with, right?
Yeah, I love it. And if I had like endless money, I would like go all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just why I was going to say maybe that's why we have friends, but I'm not like I don't want to unload on my friends. That's not my goal in life. So.
Well, I think too, it's like, you choose that. And I think if you find the right counselor, because I love that you put that in your blog too, is that, because I think some people will try going to talk to somebody and it doesn't work. So then they're like, it's not for me. It doesn't work.
Right. Yeah.
But it's finding the right person that like jives with you, that gets you, that you respond to their energy, I think is so important. So it's like, I always tell people, it's like shopping, like you're shopping. You get to choose. You have all the power. You have all the power and you get to shop for the right person to support you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's expensive shopping.
Yeah.
Because, right. And I think that's where I can see where people get frustrated because they just like, it doesn't work. And then they're like, oh, like this is going to take me forever. But then it's just when you get past that point and you find somebody that you do jive with their energy and, they are kind of helping you work through some things, you feel like you can work through it. Then it just is like, feels so good. And I don't know.
Well, Sarah Dash even talked about that too, how, I think probably I've talked to so many people, but when we had Sarah Dash on the show too, she talked about her experience with a counselor, and just how instrumental it was in discovering actually sort of her higher purpose, and some of her deeper, more intimate to herself callings of who she wants to be and who she wants to show up in the world. And I'm sure that's your experience is probably similar, where in being able to be open and raw with another person who's not there to judge and who's not there to shame you, or you know what I mean, quite the opposite, where it gives you that place of permission, a sense of permission to just let go. And I love the quote, let go and let be, I think it is, or something like that, just to let yourself be who you are, and to start to feel in the way that you're talking about, that instead of trying to be an antenna to all of the messages coming from outside, to just allow yourself to sink into that, like your root chakra, your core, like where you feel the rightness of what's right to you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
So I'm curious, Troi, this has been, I don't know, maybe 2.5 year journey for you that I've kind of been a part of in terms of seeking out some help and reading all the books. And I'm curious, if you look back and kind of connect the dots of your journey, is there a moment, and there might not be, and if there isn't, that's totally okay, because there doesn't have to be, but is there a moment or moments where you realized that you needed to do something, or that you that you wanted to choose a different path, or felt pulled to kind of serving yourself as opposed to others?
Yeah, I actually think, I think that would be a fine time to use the word needed, because there was a point where I felt like I needed to make a change, and I reached like a really, I knew there was going to be tears. I reached a really dark point, and if you've been there, you know like what it feels like. And even though I think I like to have all the fun, number sevens like to have all the fun, there's still that depression that can creep in. And when you're just I don't know, like where your mind is so foggy and you have zero clarity. And it was a point in which I considered hurting myself. And so for me, that I think that's a fine word to use at time, because at that time, I needed to do something. That was like a point where I was like, it was like a you know, a wake-up call.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think it was just, I don't think it's like when you look prior to that, it's maybe just all of the years of learning. And then I felt like at some point, yes, I'm continuing to learn and grow, but I'm also unlearning some of the things that I thought about life and myself and all of the things that I needed to do or should do. So I think that was like a turnaround point for me.
You like stole the question right out of my brain, because I was like, oh, I'm going to ask her, did you have to like unlearn things? And I'm like,
yeah.
oh, there goes my question.
Yeah, I did. I think that so many times, like there's so many great things that we're taught, you know, like you're taught when you're young, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listen more, talk less. If you're continuing to listen and to what everybody else's needs are around you, and you never speak your needs and you never express yourself, like that's just gonna, I think that just like eats you up. Like that's how resentment is caused, right? Like you're not speaking your truth. You're not speaking not even your wants, but your needs. Like every person has needs, and they don't need to be demanded. They, you know, like it just needs to be a discussion. But if you're taught also that to put others before yourself, and in your mind, that means put everybody else's needs before yourself, I'm like, what the hell is going to happen to you in the end, right? So again, no fault or blame to anybody else. These are all just things that we just learn along the way, and things that maybe we just we interpret. Maybe we just interpret that differently too, right? I might have interpreted that differently, completely different than somebody else that grew up in church culture or whatever. We all come from different families, right?
So how do you, like, if you were to give a person who might be going through that, taking yourself back those couple of years where you're in more of that darker place, I know that in that blog, you have loads of ideas of steps that you can take, but in terms of the unlearning, how did you start to unlearn things?
I think that what we would consider selfish is what I decided to be. So a lot of the world would consider that word selfish. I don't even know how it became a negative term. Like if you think of the word selfish, I mean, I guess we could say self-care. But I started, like, if you could sit down and you could be completely honest with yourself, and you're in a situation and you thought, regardless of how much it hurt anybody else, what do I want to do in this moment? What would I do? I think I might have started thinking a little bit like that. And just to make, you might just have to take a little bit of time back for yourself. It might be a lot of time. It might not, your new boundaries might not be okay with everybody else. And then sometimes you have to give other people time to adjust to those boundaries, and sometimes they might not.
What was the way that you started to find self-love again?
I think taking back, go ahead, Courtney.
No, you go ahead. I think I just want to make sure that the question was clear, but if you had an idea, then yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I like it. Just the first thing that popped into my head when you said that was like taking back some of the things that I really love to do. I think that if you find like joy in like painting again, you know, like I had started like going to University for Fine Arts and I never finished that degree. Like if you find joy in that, like take it back. And, you know, I know there's probably a lot of moms listening. And so a lot of the time, like then you know, apart from shame, there's also this whole other thing of mom guilt. But I really started seeing that my kids weren't seeing like a happy, healthy mom. And so I might have mom guilt for going out for a run that day or whatever. But if that's something that's going to keep you happy and healthy and like energized to give your kids like the best and like what they need, then it's important. Right. So that would be one thing for sure. I remember feeling like at one point that like almost guilty for reading a book because I wasn't being productive. Like there was this like thing about like I always had to be productive, and if I was like, if somebody else was doing something and I was like reading a book, it wasn't okay. So I kind of started to try to, it's hard. It's like really hard to just like sit there. You're just like sitting there. You're like, I'm just going to read this book.
I get that. That's the shame that I feel. I totally get.
I don't know, like sometimes you have to work through it. And I don't want to say these things and say like nobody else matters or like you matter the most. And so, you know, you need to just think of you. I mean, it's not that I was like just thinking of me. It's just that you're developing, you know, some new boundaries. And
I think it's actually more selfish of a person to not take care of themselves because they have not like you clearly just said, then you don't have even the possibility to be able to serve others in the way that you would want to because you're not full. No. You're not nourished. You're malnourished. It's like if you're a malnourished person, mind, body, or spirit, how do you serve to your greatest potential? So yeah, someone said that to me one time that, well, what is selfishness? Isn't it more selfish to not take that time for yourself? Yeah. Or to do the thing that lights you up or whatever.
Yeah, and you might be able to serve for a while, but then you just have that, like just that spiral down, right? Like it's not continuous. You can't continue that service or just, you can't maintain it. I think another word that's been in my vocabulary for the last while that I've really kept in my mind is the word intentional. It just means like so much more. So even like, I'll even catch myself thinking like, you know, if I'm like making dinner for my kids or whatever, like I just find so much more joy in it because I'm like intentionally doing that because I want to. And if I don't want to, like, I honestly will eat cereal. Like, come on, like, let's be real about life. Like, but then I feel good. I don't feel like resentful because I made dinner and I was cranky the whole time. Like, I'm just like, oh, whatever, we're having cereal, right? Like, no big deal. Your kids aren't going to die, like, from cereal, like that one night that you had cereal for dinner.
I love that because it's like, it's so ridiculous the things we feel guilty for, like, yeah, and there's just so many of them. Like, we feel guilty for slowing down and taking time to read a book. We feel guilty for doing all the things that we want to do. We feel guilty for
not doing enough
easy, right? Like choosing, like, we do snack suppers all the time in the people's house because I'm like, I am like taxed to hear like I'm full past my limit, and adding cooking to that is going to cause me to like overflow. And so we're doing crackers and cheese and cut up veggies and some whatever, right? Like, yeah. And it's like, when you said that, I was like, yeah, like, it's okay. They're not going to die from like the one night they had cereal for supper. Like, why do we get so uptight and with ourselves over these little things that just like don't serve anybody?
Yeah. I don't know.
What's the thing that you feel is the shame piece that you just keep holding on to, or that's been the hardest to undo?
Oh God. like the thing that I get triggered at, or one of, because there's a couple. I don't like asking for help. I know that sounds so stupid, but I think because if you've received help in the past and it hasn't been intentional, and it kind of ends up getting like thrown back, right? And then there you find out how much resentment there is because of that help that you received in the past. So now I'm like, I don't like it when people help me if I don't feel like they want to. That's actually the one thing that's come up recently, because I didn't know it before, like my trigger point was something else. And so this is a whole thing about learning. I think, like Brene Brown says, there's enough empathy to go, because you give somebody empathy doesn't mean that there is less of it later on. For me, it's learning too. Like, just because like we haven't learned all things, like we're still learning. And so now I've learned that my trigger point is now this. And I'm just like, I'm just going to do it myself, because like, I don't want anybody to throw it back in my face that, hey, I did this for you, at this time. That's a big one for me. I don't know if that's, so that's one thing that I'm working on. And I had a friend say to me recently, like, if I offer to help you, it's because I mean it. Like, I actually want to help you. Like, you don't have to be Miss Independent all the time.
That's a real thing though. Like, Miss Independent lives in this woman over here too, where I would rather do public speaking. I would rather do all the things everybody else is afraid of. I would rather take my mountain bike over this rock jump thing, right, than ask somebody for help. Like, that is something that I despise. I despise asking for help.
So that resonates with you. Like,
yeah, it resonates with me. I love giving help. Like, I am a giver of all the things. I love that. Like, I thrive on that. And there's no, like, and it always is, like your friend said, it's always with no reciprocation required, right? That just feels so good. So why I don't want to let other people have that opportunity to feel so good helping me, I don't know, but that's definitely.
But not everybody is as intentional as you. And so that's maybe where my whole intentional thing came from too, was, if I help somebody, I never want to say to them, or to say in my mind even, like, they're not willing to help me and look at everything I've done for them. Because at that time, they're just choosing, they might not have the capacity for me at that time, right? They might be going through their whole other thing. And so I never want to throw that back into somebody's face and be like, hey, I really need help right now, and look at all the things you've done for me. Like, that's just a guilt trip. And so Jode, like, somebody might not be as intentional as you, right? And I mean, I do. And so there are friends, and you're one of them, that I know, like, if you offer to help me, I know you mean it, because you could be spending your time doing anything, and you have a million other things. I know you're only going to, like, offer if you really want to, and you really have the time, and you are intentional about it. Like, I don't know, but that's where your boundaries come in too. Like, if I just don't have the time or somebody for something, I used to be such a yes person. Now I'll just be like, no, you know what? Like, I really want to help, but I just don't have the time right now. But that's intentional too, because that's intentional to yourself and intentional to your kids. And it's just being honest, right?
And intentional to that other person, because you don't want them to feel as if you're being inauthentic as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, because it'd be one thing, like, if you said yes, but you then resented that.
Yeah.
Yes later, right? That's not serving anybody.
Yeah, sometimes that's how I feel like when I'm serving. When I'm waitressing, I said yes to this shift and I don't want to serve you any more food.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. I do want to dive into, what were we, oh, there was something, all the hats, wearing all the hats.
Oh yeah.
Right? And like, I loved the notes that you put in our little show, like prep notes, I thought were brilliant, in terms of like why we feel so ashamed or guilty for wanting more and wanting to do all the things. And like, why in your perspective, why does that exist? Like, why do we feel like ashamed for wanting more and wanting to feel good and wanting to do all the things?
It depends. Maybe it came from somebody at one point who thought that you couldn't divert energy into different I don't know, like I said before, I'm okay at being like mediocre at a bunch of things instead of like really good at any one thing.
I know, I love that. Well, and I love the idea of contentment, and like that we were, and I don't know if this is a generational thing, if it's a religious thing, or if it's like our parents' generation of, you should just be happy with what you have. And like, you should just be content with the way things are. And maybe that comes from, I just had this thought just now, maybe that comes from like, I know, for speaking for my folks and my grandparents, they grew up through some pretty crappy, rough times, and didn't have a lot. So I can see that perspective coming from like, you have no idea how bad it can be. Like, you should just be happy with the way things are. But that caused so much grief for me, because I have these like huge aspirations and these huge ideas of all the things I'm going to do. And then not knowing that it was okay to go for those things and do all of that. Like, I should just be happy.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Imagine if somebody said that to Oprah, or like anybody else in this life who's worked hard to get somewhere and be somebody, you know. I think that there's a difference though between being discontent and just wanting like to learn something new, or just wanting to do something. I mean, like, is it okay? Should I say to the guy that's like, I don't know. Like, I know what you're saying. Like, it's like, just because I want more doesn't mean I'm not happy with the way things are right now too. And like, you can be joyful in the moment of and present in where you are right now, while still working towards other things, and still should I just like, is it better for me to sit on the couch and like do nothing for 3 days and say, well, I'm just content with this? Or should I go outside, get some exercise, meet somebody new, take my kids for a bike ride? I don't, like, you could look at it any way. Yeah, and there's no right or wrong there. Like, if you feel like you need to sit on the couch and meditate for 3 days, that could be exactly what you need to do. And there's no, like, I like the idea of removing the right and wrong, like that there is no right or wrong, that you can be content in all the different scenarios while being still and quiet, and also while pursuing lots of things. And then there's a whole nother side to that. Like, if you've been sitting on the couch for 3 days and you are discontent, like that, like, you need to trust your body, you need to trust yourself. And, if you don't feel content, then change it. I don't know. Like, I know that you can get caught up in this, like, always wanting more. And I said that to my girlfriend once, like, when we were just in the city. I was like, oh man, if I lived in the city, like, I wonder if I could get caught up in, like, oh, like I need a newer truck and I need this and I need that and I need this. And maybe that's just where people place their value. But I feel like I'm getting a little off track here.
Actually, can I jump in? Because
jump in.
You just sort of touched on what was going on in my mind a little bit. Being that I'm sort of on the opposite end of the teeter-totter, with you guys, like we're balancing each other out on this. And some of the shame that I feel, again, is wanting less.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes because there's a lot of messaging out there as to, a lot of messaging that I have in my life because of the people who I put in my life and the mentors and like the gurus and stuff like that, where it's, using the law of attraction to attract big things into your life and create big dreams. And that's what I coach people to do as well, is like dream big and want what you want. And then I'm stuck in this sort of juxtaposition, sort of dichotomy, where what I'm learning about myself is that the less I have, the happier I am and the more content I am. But it's actually only recently since COVID hit that I've finally felt like the shame of that has lifted, or I don't know if it's shame or if that's the right word, or just the angst, I guess, around that, because I was like, why, like, am I doing this wrong? Am I not allowing myself to have abundance and things like that? And then I just came to, like, it's this realization that, well, the less I have makes me happy in this phase of my life too. And I like that you said that, Jody, that things ebb and flow, right? Like at a different point in my life, that might not be what my needs are at that time, but my needs right now are this. And my younger cousin actually kept popping into my mind. So he's in grade 6, and if you ask him what he aspires to do in his life, he really, like, he loved video games, but so he would love to do anything with video games. But he said, like, he's like, something simple. He's like, I don't really want to have like a super complicated job. He's like, I would love to just like work at a gas station or at a convenience store. And when he talks about it, he sincerely means it. And it's really interesting because then it pulls me back into that idea. So as a teacher, how do you interact with that? But as a parent, how do you interact with that? And do you start saying, oh, well, that's nothing to strive for, or, why would you ever want to work at a convenience store and versus being like, cool, tell me more about that.
Is acceptance, right?
Right.
And so content to you, but I do that resonates with me too, about just like while COVID's been happening, this slowdown of everything has just been like really lovely for me as well. And like that kind of goes along the lines of what Jody said about like the ebb and flow of it. And not everything for me has to be like, I have to do all the things all the time. It's over time, right? And so, yeah, you have this time where you slow down and like you said, like you're content with less, and that's like such a beautiful thing. But it's like just accepting that we're all different. And so if you have, like you said, your cousin, like it's that acceptance and being like, well, I'm super excited for you because you know that everybody's different, and what feels so good for him might not be what it would be for something else, but doesn't mean it's wrong.
Right. And what's so cool about him is that he's just speaking from his heart, and he hasn't let people tell him what he should or should, you know what I mean? Like that's just honest. That's his honest answer. And I think it just keeps coming back to what you were saying, Troi. It's just going inward. Like what is it that feels right in your body is what you kind of keep saying, and using your body as your antenna versus everything out there. Because that's what differentiates all of us. And when we listen to that, that's when we get the answers, and that's when we feel content or discontent, and then when you feel discontent, okay, what can I do now? If I feel content, great, like relish in the moment instead of feeling like you have to do more or less wherever you're at, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I love this idea of like when you were talking about abundance, Courtney, that I think when people hear that word, they think one thing, but they don't realize it could be anything. Like you right now are attracting an abundance of quiet and an abundance of time with Michaela. And, you know, like you're attracting the abundance that you need right now and you desire right now, right? I think when people hear, you know, abundance, they think things and money and travel and that. And for me, abundance is so not that. We had the big, beautiful, brand new house, and we had, you know, the 2 brand new cars, and we've had those things, and living in our little tiny old house that we're slowly fixing up, and, you know, riding our bikes everywhere. And like, that is abundant to me. It's like that there's abundance in simplicity. And I think that's like the journey that you're on right now is so beautiful. And I think it's going to just bring so much clarity for you. And COVID has, for a lot of people, I think, has brought a lot of clarity to like, okay, now what actually matters to me? What are my values, and what do I want to prioritize, you know, moving out of COVID, you know, however that looks. Yeah. So Troi, you have read a lot of books, and we've kind of referred to a couple of them already. You've mentioned them. Do you want to just share with everybody, I don't know, a couple of the books and maybe what you learned, and just so if they feel like a calling to read those books or a need to read those books?
Yeah. So I will clarify a little bit. I'm a super busy person most of the time. So I've started a lot of books.
You are just like me.
I cannot say that I have finished every single one right now, or I finished it and then like gone back, or I've like jumped around, and then, you know, like I'm that kind of book person. So I probably have, like right now, I'm probably reading like 10 books. Like I have a book in like every spot in my house. I even have a book in the kitchen, so that when I'm like cooking, I'm like reading and stirring. I have a book in my purse. I have a book in like 3 different spots in my living room. I have a book on my desk right now. I have 3 books by my bed. So I'm like that kind of book person. And then there'll be like a lot of times where I'll be like, I know it's in one of these books somewhere. Like I need to get those little sticky notes. Like Jody, for my birthday. Just
I'm on it. I have lots of those.
But yeah, there's definitely a couple that like have stuck out, or that have like, I've just been going through for a long time and like really soaking it up. So the one is The Mastery of Love, by Don Miguel Ruiz, I think is how you say his name. And he writes, and like his books are like nice and small, and like you could read it in no time at all, and then you could go back through and read it again. And then the other one, I think I might have had 2 or 3 listed here, is that one called It's Not Always Depression by Hilary Jacobs Hendel. And she talks about these like 7 core emotions, and just kind of actually feeling them. There's so many times where you might have been, so this is going back to, where does shame come from? I don't know if you were ever, like when you were a little girl and you started crying, and somebody might have said to you, oh, don't cry about that, or that's nothing to cry about. And like I notice it now because I have kids, but then I think about like when I was a child, and if that, you know, like if you were ever told that, and at no fault of anybody else's, like at that time, that's what people think, like there's no reason why you should be crying about that. But if you as a little child like don't feel those emotions, and then throughout your whole life, if you're taught not to feel those emotions, not to feel that sadness or grief, like grief isn't just done. Grief like comes and goes. You know, I was talking to my girlfriend today, is like the anniversary of the death of her dad, and like we're on the phone today, and I'm gonna start crying again. But like that, she's feeling that grief again, because something exciting happened in her life yesterday and today he's not there to share it with her. And so, you know, if you're not going to continually feeling those things, then they're going to come up in some other way. And lots of the times then you just use distractions to mask those. And then that's when you feel like the depression and the stress and the anxiety, because you're just masking what those feelings that you don't want to feel. So she talks about it in a change triangle. And I think that, and she talks about feeling it too in your body. And so those were like things that I started noticing for me, that I would just ignore. Like I would just, if I felt something in my body, I would just ignore it. And I would just be like, oh, well, that's wrong because this is what I actually should do. And the society says this is what I should do. And now I notice it, and like that thing with asking somebody for help, like I noticed it and I felt it in my body, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a thing for me. And like, this is like something that I have to work on. And it's just really interesting. It's really interesting how your mind and your body are connected. And then actually like identifying one of these emotions, one of these 7 core emotions. So that would be, I think I've already sold like 10 books for this author. Like, I posted on my Instagram, and then she like reposted it because I love this book. I love what she had to say. And actually when like I read it, I was like, well, that really seems so simple. It's a triangle. But it's like, I'm like, it really makes so much sense. Mm-hmm. So that one would be like one that I think everybody should read. Anything by Brene Brown is amazing. Right now I'm in the middle of Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like reading it. And then me and my girlfriends from high school, actually, that we haven't seen each other for at least 15 or 20 years. I have one lives in Chicago, one lives in Montreal, and one lives in Germany. But the one in Germany is in Edmonton right now. And we have a book club, and we like get together on Zoom. And it's so funny because I'm like, pre-COVID, we could have done this. It's like all of a sudden.
Is that true?
All of a sudden you're like doing all of these things that you could have done before, but you never used Zoom before.
It's so true.
Yeah. So yeah, her book is really good. She has some really interesting things to say. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much. So Jody and I, we wanted to kind of give you a gift by telling you the part of your story that touched each of us the most in our own lives. Sort of our idea was looking at the blog. The blog that you wrote was beautiful. It was concise and to the point, and yet raw and vulnerable. And I think it's, if a person doesn't have time to read a book, if they can start with your blog, I think that they'll get insight about the piece of themselves that they're ready to work on. Because you listed so many different areas and so many different options of ways. So we thought it might be kind of neat to share with you the piece that resonated the most with us. So the piece for me, I'm just scrolling now because I was scrolling up and down before I lost the spot, was the section where you said, I left blank space on my calendar and stopped trying to prove my worth. I was the woman who would feel guilty for working on painting or writing a blog post. This is so, it resonates so much that I'm reading this and it's making me teary. Or writing a blog post, I would hide the book if someone came into the room. I learned to be productive, and if I wasn't productive, then really, what was I? That feels for me, like that really, it creates emotion. And I don't really want to like dive into that other than saying thank you for sharing that, because it helps me to see that side of my own story, and how that's a piece where now I get to dive into that in my own life and discover where does that come from, and what parts of it are good, and what parts of it do I want to start to reteach myself a new message. So that was what stood out for me.
This isn't fair because I am the crier between Courtney and I. Like every workshop we've ever done together, I'm like the one who's like trying to get through my story with like, right? Like the ugly sob happening. And now like Troi started crying before and then Courtney. And so now I'm like all super emotional. So we got to try to get through this without the ugly cry coming out, right? I
already did it. So I just like broke. I already did the ugly cry, so I just broke the ice for you.
First I want to say how proud I am of you, Troi, to like put this out there. It's not easy to put your story out there and to invite people to be a part of that story. I think there's so much value in your blog that literally we could walk down the street and pick out 10 random people and have them read it, and they would find something in there that resonates with them. For me, it was learning to say no. Like that is like, I am a yes person. I am like, you need me to do what? Yes, I'll be there. You want to go for this run? Yes, I'll be there. Even though I have another run later today or da, 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 right? I said yes to everything. And I actually read a book. Oh God, now I can't remember. I've read it a couple times. It's about essentialism and like determining what's essential in your life and what isn't, and how to say no, basically. And it was probably the most, it was not an exciting book to read, but it probably had the most profound effect on me. And it's this question of like asking yourself, like, will this actually serve me? Will this, you wrote, will this enhance my day or my life? Like how many times do we stop and actually give ourselves a moment to think before we answer somebody, right? And the best advice I got was just, if you have that knee jerk, like you want to respond, just tell them, I'll get back to you in 10 minutes, or just, you know, like I'll consider it and I'll get back to you. And then that creates this space for you to like figure out if it is something you want to say yes to, and also give yourself permission to say no to it. And that's huge. It was huge for me. For me now, it's like, I don't say yes unless it's a hell yes. So if I'm saying yes to something, that means it aligns with my goals, it aligns with my values, it aligns with my family, and it aligns with the value that I've learned to put on my time. Because my time was just like getting dished out to everybody. And then I was feeling empty, even though I had done all these things, because I said yes to all these things. So I've been like productive, but not full, right? So there's a difference between being productive and doing things that fill you up. And so that section for me is huge. And like you said, your yes things became time with your kids, self-care. Like that's a huge one for us women. You have a whole section in here about giving yourself permission for self-care. Being with and helping friends and visiting your mom. Like those were, in that moment, those were your yes things, and your yes things are going to change. They're not always going to be the same. But I think giving yourself permission to say no and creating the space you need so you can say no if that's what you need to say is so incredibly powerful for living a joyful, fulfilled life, not feeling like you're, you know, doing too much, right? It's of the wrong things. It doesn't even have to be doing too many things. It's just not the right things. Yeah.
I think it was in Shonda Rhimes' book, which had yes in the title. I don't remember.
A Yes Life or something like that.
Yeah, it was a great book. I like that one. I think it was in her book that she said, saying no to others is saying yes to yourself, or vice versa. Yeah. Being able to say no to others is actually a yes to yourself. So it was just a neat perspective.
Yeah. Also, no is a full sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
No.
You don't have to explain it. Just to know. Yeah. I know. I find myself saying yes to a lot fewer things now because it requires a lot to be a hell yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Intentional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It's all about intention. Yeah, and alignment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me really happy that you guys both just got something from that. I think that when you like put something out there, and like Courtney, you said you just seemed ready. I mean, I wrote that and sat on it for I don't know how long before I like put it out there for everybody to read, right? And because vulnerability is like it's a big thing, and I think that lots of the times you see people put something out there and you're like I kind of sometimes I'm like, why? Like, what is my why? What's my reason for putting this out there? Why am I sharing my story? Why am I sharing any of this with anybody? But I think that vulnerability, it like you said, like you got something from it and it resonates with you, and it's something that you just almost need to know that somebody else is feeling that way or that they've gone through it. Yeah. And obviously, like, I mean, I get choked up about like all of it all over again. So when you ask me about a trigger thing, like they're all trigger things for me because they're always things that you're working on, right?
Yeah, I don't know that they go away. Like they don't disappear. You're just aware of them.
Yeah, and they get better for sure. But when you're aware of them, then you can be, I think you can just have a healthier change, right?
Mm-hmm. You know, almost like come to have a healthy relationship with each of them too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, I recognize you.
Yeah.
I know what you're trying to do to me.
Totally. Yeah.
So if there was, oh wait, before I say this, Jody and I wanted to extend the invitation out to the people who are watching this as well to leave a comment about, or comment to Troi or comment on underneath this link of the piece of that blog that touched you as well. Just so that we can all kind of join in community and be there to support each other and just share that. I think it's really cool that you put yourself on the line, and it's a really neat way for all of us to come together and show you just how much of an impact that actually has. So
yeah, it's really encouraging because I have like all of these things that I'm sitting on it to like put out there again, right? Like I love writing, and so it's encouraging, and so maybe it's something that I keep writing.
I think you should. I was gonna shit all over you right now.
Courtney, don't you shit on me.
I would love to read more of your writing. I'll put it that way.
Thank you.
I guess just to kind of start to wrap things up, is there anything that's left over on your heart that you feel that you would love to share with those people who are just maybe feeling the reality of this whole conversation and maybe at the point where they're like, holy smokes, I think I have been shooting all over myself, and where to go from here?
Well, I just think, yeah, like stop shitting on yourself and stop shitting on other people too, right? Like you don't want to cause that shame in somebody else. I mean, we feel it enough on ourselves, like we're our own worst critic. So you're saying it to somebody, they probably don't need to hear it. But yeah, I just want to thank you guys. Thank you so much, and love you both. I think what you're doing is so great.
Thank you.
Something else that we like to make sure we put in here, because we like to promote all our guests and what they have to offer our listeners and everyone else. Where can people find you? What kind of services can they access from you? How can they support you, Troi?
I try to be pretty present on social media, but mostly Instagram. So my Instagram is Troi Crombie. Apparently nobody else has that name. My website is troicrombie.ca, which is like all of my photography stuff, art stuff, and personal blog stuff. And then they can, message me from there. And yeah, the whole like left side of my brain, that's the right side of my brain. The left side of my brain is financial. But yeah, they can message me from there. That's the easiest way.
That's awesome. We'll include all those links in the show notes so that we'll make it easy for them.
Thanks, ladies.
You betcha. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us and exploring such a intimate, and I like that it's more popular and that there's a space for it, but I think it's still underdeveloped, underexplored.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty stoked that we got to explore it with you, and we'll have you on the next time when we dive into shameless with our sexuality.
I got lots to say on that one.
All right, great.
Let's do it.
Guys.
Yeah, so just as we say goodbye to you and turn it back out to everybody who's watching, we hope that you're able to take Troi's message, internalize it, and for that 1 minute every single day, be intentional. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.